intimacy to actually look like some useful things. And I want to talk about those and give them to you. So the first thing I would tell you guys is crisis intimacy, right? So we know some of the other intimacy factors I mentioned off the top. The first thing that might come to mind, at least when I'm talking to other people, and for me, before I started learning more about intimacy, was sex. But there's a lot of options for intimacy, and the more we can delve into that, everything starts to wrap around each other. Okay, so crisis intimacy says that even when things are going wrong, how do we navigate those things together, and can we get better at applying our principles in those moments? So intellectual intimacy is about sharing of thoughts, beliefs, and ideas as a form of intimacy. And there's nothing like it, you guys. The more that you start delving into each other's thought processes without criticizing each other or beliefs or knowledge, and just growing together in those scenarios and can share ideas, the connection ability whenever you're sharing your intellect is huge. Okay. So all these actually can go with practices that you can start implementing as well in your relationship. Emotional intimacy, and we started talking about vulnerability earlier, but empathy is a huge piece of that. So I'm not just crushing somebody who's being vulnerable. A counter to that is being able to be empathetic as well. That starts to create the deep emotional connection that we need. So then there's also spiritual intimacy, and for some couples, you might already be tapping into this in different ways. But some options for spiritual intimacy is spiritual practices, which might be things like the Bible and your understanding and belief and relationship with God. But then it's also, I've included the values and ethics that you have in your relationship. One cool thing that my wife and I were doing for a while is being able to trade video messages about what our intentions were and what that looks like. And that was a huge connecting factor for us to be able to just share, like, here's our focus. And we were building the focus of that, of us exchanging that, was just to be able to share with each other constantly, like what all of it looked like for us. And I think that kind of grew us into a different scenario. Adventure intimacy, and this is also a cool one. Like, one of the things that I've been watching lately and kind of seeing and being interested in is, like, us growing together means that we're not headed the opposite way. So what kinds of things are we doing to actually branch out? Well, one of the things that we can do is start creating different kinds of experiences. And you don't have to make it extravagant, but it's fun if it's extravagant. But there's availability to try new things and adventures in your home area. I guarantee it. Just be willing to do a little bit more than what you're doing right now, right? And so maybe it's a date night, but it could be also a walk night, or or something simple like finding a new trail. Like, there's so many opportunities for you to be able to create different adventures and build on this area of intimacy. So fostering intimacy through action, we just gave you a few things that you can start looking at, but how, what are the actions that you can do? So the first one, and again, I won't spend too much time on the communication factor because we talked about it last week, but just being able to initiate an open and honest communication. So there's usually a choice, like, do I want to close dishonest relationship that's safe, or do I want to open and honest communication that means connectedness, right? And for the most of us, we would choose the second, right? And so us just being able to initiate that is a huge deal. Sharing experiences and adventures together, we just talked about that, but there's examples that I have here that kind of, and if you guys wanted to go back and rewatch the video just to kind of see, like, there's people who, the more experiences you share together, then you start to actually grow together. And I have a couple who rekindled their intimacy by taking a dance class together, right? Which that helps us to really, and by the way, dancing is one of those adventures that maybe you have never done together, and it'd be huge for you just to try it out. Okay. So the more we're able to share experiences, it starts growing and us together and starts building on us in a different kind of way. And then practicing affirmation appreciation. A couple of weeks ago, we actually talked to somebody who was showing us how to do appreciation. Go back and watch that video. That was a helpful one. But this is something that helps us to build closer together and raise our intimacy up. Are you affirming each other, right? Are you showing appreciation in the most simple times? Even when it doesn't matter, say that I appreciate you. And then setting and supporting boundaries. So now I talk about boundaries a different way. And so I want you guys to be able to hear this out. I don't talk about boundaries, and I think it's actually a sad thing that happens. I don't talk about boundaries in a way that says you need to set boundaries with other people. Like, I don't want to set boundaries with my partner and tell them what to do. I want to know the boundaries that I'm setting for myself. And the reason we don't set boundaries with somebody else is because I don't if they're not willing or in that place, I don't need to be powerless or try to create somebody else's behaviors different. I need to figure out what it's going to take for me to do something different to be okay, right? So how do I do that? Well, I do that by saying I know these are my boundaries and this is what I'm going to do. Well, how does that happen in a couple relationship? If I set my boundaries with my limits and the things that I would do, and I can share that with my partner, and they're in a place of loving and being able to acknowledge that and go along with that, it works out perfectly because now we can say, okay, hey, I want to help you with that scenario and let's move on it together. Okay. So it's really important that we switch that in our mind so we don't grow in powerlessness or start creating powerless scenarios in our relationship. Forgiveness and letting go of grudges. So a lot of things that we accidentally do is we create punishment traps and we create scenarios that make us hang on to things. Forgiveness is not about your partner. If you forgive them, it doesn't mean that you approved of their behavior. If you forgive them, it means that you're ready to have a free space in your heart, right? And in bingo, there was always that middle spot, and we were so grateful to have it. Forgiveness is like creating that bingo spot in the middle, right? Can you create forgiveness so you can have one extra spot in your heart to be able to move on things, right? So forgiveness is not about your partner. Forgiveness is about you being able to say, I need a different kind of space and I need to move on something different. The lack of forgiveness, and this might be a challenge for us to accept, the lack of forgiveness is your attempt to create punishment, which fully makes sense because usually when we're hurt, the opportunity after being hurt is saying, like, how can I fix this scenario? And that fix this scenario a lot of times is I need to punish. So we're trying to hold somebody accountable for their behaviors, but we're not really in a position to ultimately do that. Okay. And so being able to let go and being able to forgive are something that is going to allow you to move closer to somebody because you're not holding on to the hardest thing possible. So my idea for us being able to thrive in intimacy is for us to really think about how can I rewire my mind and start thinking differently about how it goes. It can't go outside in, it has to go inside out. So if you're willing to work on yourself as far as understanding the vulnerability and all the principles that we talked about, then you start creating a place in your relationship for how intimacy could happen. If you're waiting for your partner to get to a different spot or to do something different before you start creating intimacy, you're going to keep waiting. Matter of fact, you're going to build something in your own heart and you're going to distance the ability to be close to each other and create intimacy. So for you to change it, you're going to have to start building on the inside, becoming that person who's willing to do all the principles that we talked about here, which you can freeze the screen, all the principles that we talked about here, start working on those. And then you start creating that in your relationship. That's your opportunity. That's the way to think about building intimacy. It won't be about the skills that you have. I promise you, you can have all the skills in the world. It'll be about who you're being in these scenarios. That gives you the best opportunity to change intimacy in your relationship and create a thriving relationship. Man, we're way over today, but I think you guys got tons of juice in this conversation. I hope you guys all have a good evening, and we'll talk to you soon.